Good evening and welcome to this artist talk with the Swedish artist Santiago Mostyn and the Swedish curator Johan Pousette. My name is Helene Larsson and I'm the Swedish culture counselor to the United States. I am thrilled that the embassy is currently exhibiting Santiago Mostyn's video installation Suedi, Slow Wave Edit, here in House of Sweden in Washington D.C. The exhibition is open to the public on Saturdays and Sunday between noon and 5 p.m. until February 20th. If you live here in DC or happens to visit, please do stop by. If you are joining us tonight live, you may use the chat function to ask questions, and we will try to get to as many of them as possible throughout the next hour. I will let Santiago tell you more about his video work here at House of Sweden, as well as other projects within his artistic practice. Welcome to you, the audience, and welcome Santiago and Johan. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to the Embassy of Sweden for inviting us to have this conversation. Santiago, we know each other from before. You were actually an artist in residence at Jaspis, the organization that I was head of in Sweden. We did the project at the Venice Biennale. And not least, we also together, as a collaboration between Jaspis and Moderna Museet, we did a survey of the art scene in Sweden, which actually both became an exhibition that you curated and also a book. But we never actually did this before. We never had this kind of conversation before. So I'm looking forward.
Likewise, yeah, it's great to be here.
So the reason actually that we are having this conversation is that you have a piece installed now in the House of Sweden, the Suedi Slow Wave Edit. Would you like to say something, describe the piece?
Definitely. The work that's up here now is a 2-channel video installation, and it is a work which, for me, I guess, shows both a macrocosmic and microcosmic perspective on let's say, migration into Sweden in recent years, and also the sort of identity of people who are part of that culture. You see one video channel which has footage which I licensed from drone operators in Southeast Europe, and the other channel is a choreography which I arranged between 2 wrestlers, where I've taken their wrestling moves and their training moves and made them kind of move together in a way which seems at first playful, but then becomes more and more heated and sort of erupts into a kind of intense interaction, almost altercation, by the end of the video.
So this was, how did it start? Because this was a commission actually for a folk music project.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the work was commissioned by Kulturhuset in Stockholm, and I was actually invited to make a work based on the, very popular rap song Suedi by Erik Lundin.
Mm-hmm.
And, the song, in the song he raps about coming to terms with his own sense of place within Sweden. His parents have a background from Western Africa, and he's always kind of, at least as he raps about it, he's always felt a sort of dissonance between how he feels as someone born and raised in Sweden and how he's perceived or treated by many people there. And in the lyrics, he's coming to terms, almost claiming his right to say that he is from this place, just like everyone else who's born there.
Yeah.
And, it was parallel to my experience of the place, but I'm not born and raised in Sweden. But I do sort of have that sense of dislocation built into my own history, but also kind of informing my practice in a way. And so it felt quite, it felt in tune and it felt like the right work to be offered, and that was the basis or the grounding of the piece.
We actually have the opportunity to have a look at an excerpt from this video work, so maybe we could have that now.
Jag var Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Visst, jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Visst, jag vaknade upp och var Suedi.
So what did we see? I mean, there are people on the move. Who are these people?
Well, the footage was licensed from drone operators in Slovenia, Slovakia, and different parts of Southeast Europe in 2017. And, you know, it's footage of people who are seeking asylum in Europe, basically, who are escaping war and persecution and moving in search of a better life. And then the footage moves from there to this kind of snowy open landscape, which is a Swedish landscape. And then the final shot of the video is actually of the Kulturhuset, the culture house in central Stockholm, where the video was being screened. And so the last shot you see is the shot of the place where you are when you're watching it as an audience member. So you come out of the screening room and you actually look onto the same plaza through the window that the camera is seeing in the video. So it sort of references itself in that way.
And this footage maybe it's needed to just remind us that this footage was taken during this huge wave of people trying to escape, not least the war in Syria, for example. And also Sweden was a country that received a large number of asylum seekers, maybe even the largest number per capita in Europe.
That's definitely true. I mean, I wouldn't describe anybody as a wave necessarily, but it was something that was extremely impactful for me as someone who had just at that time recently been given permission to stay in Sweden longer term, to have permanent residence. And there felt like there was a real dissonance between me suddenly having the right to be there and others who, were not given that right. And it was a period of years where I was thinking about what these stories mean when they're mediated. You know, what it means to picture black and brown people who are suffering while you are on the other side of that screen which is showing that suffering. It almost produces a separation between us and them. And it's something that I've tried to think through or talk about somehow in a couple of different works that are from that time period.
There is the second half of this piece is actually showing another kind of movements, if we may say so. So maybe we should have a look at that.
Yeah.
Jag var Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Visst, jag vaknade upp och var Suedi. Jag vaknar upp och var Suedi. Jag vaknar upp och var Suedi. Visst, jag vaknar upp och var Suedi.
So, could you tell us something about why you chose to include these two wrestlers and what they represent?
I think it's quite fascinating that there's a group of people in the society who hold a certain amount of power or influence, or almost you could say central, but who are hardly ever objectified. And these are two Swedish men who are fighters, wrestlers, who I think take, well, as a matter of course, take their specific identity for granted, maybe don't think so much about, or they're not forced to think about who they are and where they're from and what their language is and whether they should learn a new language or try to fit in or not. And so it somehow felt in many ways like a mirror image, but like a mirror image in terms of, well, mirror image is the wrong analogy, but let's say in terms of scale, you have the view from high up above, where you see a group of individuals that of which each one has the potential to become someone great or someone speaking this language or that language, bringing these different cultures with them. And on the other, you have the kind of fleshy, almost unthinking physicality of the masculine form in this place that some of them will end up. And that contrast was something that I wanted to kind of present, not, well, again, contrast is the wrong word, but I wanted to present them together as a way to, experience some sort of dissonance again, or dislocation between these two types of images, and also just to look more closely at what a body is, and this kind of body which isn't looked at closely in this way so often.
They certainly seem very confident in their presence somehow.
Yeah, and that's something which was very interesting with filming them as well, which is that I think, wrestlers, and I'm sure different athletes of different kinds are kind of the most comfortable in their bodies. They don't need to prove themselves because they have that sort of gravity within themselves from the practice that they engage in. So there was that grounding, and then there was the kind of floating view of something which is on the way to a reckoning with that image. Two images which will experience each other at a certain point in time, yet to come.
Yeah. And then there's this third element, which is the soundtrack, the music, by Erik Lundin.
And slow wave.
And slow wave. So yes, this is very important, right? So this is it's edited. It's a remake somehow.
Yeah, it's a chopped and screwed version of Erik Lundin's track. So the track by Erik Lundin, which is called Suedi, which is sort of it's the Arabic word for Swedish. But not quite. But it's what they say when they say Swedish. Is a kind of like straight up, almost boom bap style rap song, with this very potent and important message, and but somehow including it, a slow wave, a duo of musicians and producers. Susanna Jablonski and William Rickman, who I've worked with and collaborated with for many years on different projects. And I was talking to them about this work, and then we were listening to the song together, and we somehow felt that it needed to be in tune a bit differently with the images and somehow bring some more lift and some more emotion and something which was a bit more soaring. And so we worked back and forth to develop a piece which basically took the lyrics. So the lyrics are actually the a cappella version of Eric Lundin singing. His team sent them to us, and then the track is totally a new production by Slow Wave.
So this is a collective work, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And we've spoken previously about that shift from collectivity to individual practice, and how it, within the art world sometimes gets hidden or subsumed by the kind of identity of the individual artist. But
which in this case is you.
Yeah.
But you do, of course, give credit to your collaborators, but it's also interesting that many artworks are very often a collective effort.
Yeah,
but
almost always.
It's this single artist who gets the main attention somehow. Eric Lundin, I read an interview with Eric there, and he talked about this word that is being used in Sweden. You talk about the second generation immigrants. And he had also studied in United States, and he said that this is only in Sweden. In the United States, if you are second generation, you are already American.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost an absurd concept to be second generation immigrant, because you're not at that point. I mean, we can talk about cultural anchors, and I think that's a metaphor which is more valid and has more potential in it, to say that one is anchored in multiple places in the world, and so you draw influence, or you exist in the world based on your upbringing and based on your social and cultural origins, and that's part of the great big stew that is contemporary life, at least in the Western world, as I've experienced it. But yeah, to say that you're an immigrant when you were born in a country, and your parents even sometimes were born in the country, is a bit of a stretch. And I think it speaks a little bit to the inflexibility of, I guess, Swedish society to kind of incorporate these stories and these identities into the wider narrative.
You have made another work also about, well, it's close to migration. It's about borders. A work called Citizen, where you are performing. You are rowing from the Turkish coast to the most nearby Greek island of Samos, and this is a travel into the European Union, so crossing the border. Maybe we should see an excerpt from that video as well.
Yeah, we're going to see just so it's also a two-channel work, where on one side, on one projection, you see the view from the Turkish coastline, where the camera is, and eventually some footage from myself in the boat. And then from the other side, it's you see the view from Greece, or from Samos. And the work is the length of the crossing. But we're just going to see a couple of minutes of the introduction.
How long was the actual crossing?
It was about just over 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is also the length of the piece.
Yeah, exactly.
So how much are you influenced by your own background? Because I know you're actually born in the United States, and then your family moved to Grenada, and then to Zimbabwe, and then you grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, and then coming back to the United States for studies, and then you moved for a while to Germany, and now you live in Sweden. So your own background, how much does it influence your work?
I mean, I would say, my background influences the work in the sense that, my point of view in the world comes from my upbringing, as I suppose it does of many people. But at a certain point when I was kind of coming into a young adulthood, I think I needed to really, I really started questioning what my place in the world was, because especially when I was very young, we were dislocated, at least from Grenada. That was a kind of war situation which we were forced out of. And so it's a question that that I needed to answer for myself. What was my place, and is that even a question that needs an answer necessarily? And a lot of the first work that I started making as I was coming out of university and traveling in the world a little bit was in a sense a way of coming to terms with that set of questions. I would say at the moment my work is not necessarily directly about my own experience, but obviously that informs the way that I see things and what I choose to work on and what I empathize with at certain times as well.
You do have an interest in displacement and diaspora. Is this something which is now also something that you're working with right now? Do you want to say something about what your ongoing work?
For sure. I mean, I can say that in some sense I've considered myself almost as a tease to sometimes say that I'm part of an American diaspora, in the sense that I was born in this country in the United States, and my parents left to find a better life elsewhere. Obviously, I'm not. I'm a child of the Black Atlantic. I grew up on both sides of this triangle between Africa and the New World and Europe, which has marked so much of the history of the Western world. But it's an interesting thought experiment, I feel like, to think that the United States is a country which is old enough and established enough that one looks elsewhere for a better life. And there is actually a legacy of this with Black Americans leaving the United States to travel into Canada in the early 20th century, or to newly formed Soviet Republic in the 1920s. Especially a lot of actors and musicians, actually, Black American actors and musicians moved to the Soviet Union in that time period. And my parents left, of course, because they were their politics was in direct conflict with the ruling party in the United States at the time, and they moved to a small island that had just had a socialist uprising, and a revolutionary government had taken power in Grenada.
African Americans moving from the States to the Soviet Union, that sounds like an untold story to me.
Yeah, there's this, and this is the thing. I mean, I come from small places, I grew up in small places, and there's stories everywhere which are known or which are told. And then there's those stories which rise to the level of history with a capital H. And up until recently, those stories have only been told by, those who won, those who have the right to tell that. And so I think a kind of urgency that I have in my practice is to investigate some of these what I would call histories, but they're not at the level of history. They are anecdotal. They are stories that have taken place, and I think if they are expressed, or if they are given a platform or given a form, then they become part of the fabric of how we conceive of what the world is and what the society we live in is, to some degree. There's always pressure to sort of define what is us and what is them, and are you from here, and what's this, and what this border is. And I think if that can be softened, or if that can be undermined somehow with these types of gestures that I sometimes try to engage in, then I think we're stepping forward in certain ways.
I think we should have a look at one more video work of yours, which is an older work, I think from 2014, called Delay. And this was actually the first work of yours that I saw. And interestingly enough, it was when the Creative Time from New York made a summit in Stockholm. And at this summit, I saw this piece of yours. Maybe we should have a look at it first, and then we could talk about it.
Sounds good. Good cut.
Good cut. So this was an excerpt, we should say.
Yeah,
also
this
from
was
a longer
about
video.
2 minutes of a 4-minute video work, with music also by Slow Wave.
So I just have to admit that the first time I saw this video, I also immediately fell in love with it, because since I'm from Stockholm myself, I also kind of realize that to me this is about breaking social codes and behaving in a way that you're not really expected. Would you like to say something about that? What brought you to do this video?
I mean, the idea for this video developed just when I had graduated and done my master's in Stockholm and had to leave and actually come back to the US to sort out, residency paperwork. So I was forced to be away for almost a year, and then came back to Stockholm and felt a real sense of double dislocation. I had gotten used to the place because I had been studying there for 2 years, and was familiar in certain ways with at least the city of Stockholm, and then had left and then had come back, and it just felt so alien. I felt like I was someone who was out of time and out of place, out of context. And I was also reacting in certain ways, or I felt like the need to react to certain slights and aggressions that would be put in my direction from different people on the street. And I thought at first that I wanted to go around and, I don't know, push people or, hit people's phones out of their hand or something like that, try and get shake people up somehow. But I stayed with the idea a bit, and then I started thinking that it would be much more provocative somehow to offer a caress rather than a touch which was violent towards people. And, the focus here was a certain category of white man who exists, and this was in Östermalm, which is, a neighborhood in the town which is kind of wealthy, and it's where people go out and have fancy drinks and so on. And so it's really a place where, young people mostly kind of dress up and really act out this very specific identity, which one is drawn to somehow, but also horrified by. At least I was at that point in time. And so it was a test. It was something that we tried. We went out with a crew and a camera and interacted with these men who were out to, for their Friday night conquests.
So it was all improvised. Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, there was one plant towards the end. You saw the last little clip there where I realized that. Well, I should say as well that the character in this video is obviously me, but I sort of saw it as a semi-fictional version of myself, someone who is a bit more deliberately naive, someone who is coming in from some kind of alien context, not knowing what the social codes are whatsoever. So what happens at a certain point, we saw towards the end of this clip, is that I'm standing close to a man outside of a 7-Eleven, and he pushes me aside, and that's suddenly when me or this character realizes that that's something that you can also do. And so the next shot is of me walking down the street and then really pushing over someone who is just walking by, and then it rolls on from there, and I tumble out and off elsewhere. So it's almost, I presented myself as a blank slate to what it means to be a person in that particular social context.
You wrote a text for the Creative Time report that I read, and you were quoting Susan Sontag and her letters from Sweden, where she's writing about avoidance, that street life in Stockholm is like about avoiding being on the streets, or if you have to be on the streets, avoid contact with people, and certainly avoid physical contact. So this is where you break that norm somehow.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, she wrote, Susan Sontag was funded by the Swedish Film Institute in the late 60s to write and also direct a couple of films. And so she was in Sweden, and she wrote this text when she was there, which was her, extremely disparaging point of view on a culture that she found way too stifled in certain ways. And it's dated, of course, in some ways, and also it's from her very specific kind of cynical New York point of view. But at the same time, there are some things in that letter which ring true even today, which is quite fascinating. That 50 years later, it can be things that you read about, which you experience in your everyday life. And it's a letter that I think all foreigners who have moved to Sweden sort of share amongst each other when they first get there to try and get some grasp of the underlying context of this new exotic place where we found ourselves.
So now it's like 7 years-ish later, from the moment when you made this film. So how do you experience Sweden today?
I mean, it's shifted, of course. It's hard to say. I mean, I think I'll always have a perspective which is one step back from someone who is maybe born and raised there. But I think this is the case with anyone who comes from a place. I mean, there's this very accurate term in Swedish, which is hemmablind, home blindness. You don't have the ability to see what's right in front of you for what it is. And it develops anywhere you are, really, where you get used to a context. And I think as I've lived in the country for quite a few years now, and I've just recently even become a Swedish citizen.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It shifts, but what doesn't change is, I suppose, where I was when I was younger and what that cultural inheritance really is. And I mean on many different levels. I mean, I'm talking about how I feel physically as a body in space. I think I feel a resonance from certain smells and colors and, the color of the soil in Zimbabwe and things like that. I feel a real cultural resonance from growing up in Trinidad, because I was there through my kind of pre-adolescence through to the end of high school. And so, musically, image-wise, that is there as well. But I suppose that maybe I'm in a third place somehow, not here or there, but in an in-between, which is to the side, where I want to, thread things together between the two, or at least, I guess I can mention Sebald, V.G. Sebald, the German writer, who was a really big influence on me for many years. And he talks about time and even history being sort of a line of moments or happenings. And for him, literature was the act of taking one of those moments and another one and lifting them up and showing them to each other, and then putting them back in their place. And I think if there's a way to kind of frame my practice, I think it might be that. Taking things which happen in contemporary society, but also historical artifacts, and mirroring them with each other, and the light that glimmers off of that experience is what the work is really.
I talked with another artist a while ago, William Kentridge, and when I asked him what kept him doing his artwork, he said that it's all about trying to make sense of the world. And I get the impression that this is, would you subscribe to that declaration somehow?
In a way, I'm always hesitant to think of sense as higher or more important than sensibility, because you have a kind of hierarchy of intellectual and academic knowledge, and sensual knowledge, I think, is lower than that. Emotional intelligence is something which has different purchase in the Western world. And to make sense of something, to figure it out, is very important. But I think also to be open and receptive to what exists in other realms, really, is also important. But I think William Kentridge does that fully, in a sense. Makes really wonderful work.
Because you were educated at Yale in the United States.
Yeah.
I'm just picking up now on your distinction between sense and sensibility. Is that also creating a different background for you compared to artists who have been studying an equivalent amount of time at an art academy or that kind of different education?
I mean, in retrospect, I think it was very important for me to get a grounding in a wide variety of subjects, and that's what the liberal arts university system gives you. You know, you are required to take courses in a broad spectrum of fields, and it's how I came to photographic practice to begin with. Is that I needed to take some courses which fit a certain category, and then I got into it, and then rolled on from there. But at the same time, not just at university, but also I think in the high school system, which I was part of, which is the British school system, basically, even though it was in the Caribbean. It's really rigorous, and it's really based on grades, and you sit in rows, and you inhale information, and then you spit it out in exams, and you get ranked, and etc. And I think it was a really difficult and long and important process for me to unlearn that way of seeing and processing the world. And I mean, through my young adulthood, through my 20s, I really was not even, I would say, part of this kind of like active and productive I don't know, life that most of us have. I kind of dropped out of that and was engaged in a different sort of collective living practice, and yeah.
Because when you left your studies at Yale, I understand it as you really took on photography, and you actually traveled around in the United States, spent time on a raft going down the Mississippi River, among other things. So what did this period give you? So, and then also, how does it relate to what you're doing today?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I finished university and I was basically down and out in New York, I was picked up by some kids on the street and taken to a collective spot where, I was met some of these kind of like underground punks and travelers, and at the time it became a family, basically. And out of this community came this project, which was called the Miss Rockaway Armada, where a group of us in New York, and then another group in California, and then some individuals from different cities around the country got together and decided to build some rafts and take kind of an aspect of the life that we were living and take it to the red states. This was kind of in the midst of George W. Bush's presidency, and there was, for the first time, a real sense of strangeness between the separation between blue and red states, I think, in a way which has become even more extreme and polarizing now. But we built these rafts, and we went down the Mississippi River, and we performed in each town, and we had really rewarding engagements with some of these towns and communities along the river. But all through the process, I was making photographs, and those photographs became a kind of monographic photographic book with writings as well. But the main aspect of my participation was actually literally was co-authoring this project. Driving the raft, cooking food for a group of 20, 25 people 3 times a day, all of these things, and I really gave myself to that. The project went sour, basically, and became a kind of shell of itself, and I stepped away from it after that. And I think that's really when I first started coming into artistic practice in the more traditional definition of it, in terms of thinking about exhibition practice and what it means to host relationships between objects and images and audiences in a space, and ideas of hospitality, and rather than the more kind of traditional making of photographs and hanging of them on the wall.
So I'm thinking when you did these travels in the United States, you were although you were born here, you were still raised in other countries. So this was like coming back or coming to a new country. So what did you learn about the United States during this time?
Well, I mean, for me, the United States is a country which is too large to have one definition. It's a culture which is on a scale which is unsustainable somehow, and you really feel that deeply when you travel the way I was traveling through the United States. You know, hitchhiking, on raft, on freight train. You have the idea of what communities should be, which is very strict in many places and quite conservative, and then you have those who don't fit into that context and drop out of society, often young people. And there's a kind of network of almost safe houses around the country where you can be hosted and you can survive somehow outside of those norms. But yeah, it's many places in one, I think, the United States, and it's not something that can be defined necessarily. It's amorphous. It's a living thing. You know, it's a place where everyone has a story, and the synaptic reactions between your story and mine and the next person's are what make it this organism, which is so kind of fascinating and beautiful and deadly at the same time.
You definitely deal with like very important questions, questions that are very relevant in our society today, like migration or racism or post-colonial matters. Do you consider yourself a political artist?
I mean, I think being an artist is a political act in and of itself somehow, in that it's not overtly productive, at least not to begin with. But I'm willing to take on any definition anyone is going to give me, let's say. I would say my strongest political stance is maybe refusal, you know,
In what sense?
refusal of set definitions, refusal of absolutes. You know, I'll never say I'll absolutely do this or not. I maybe it comes from having been dislocated so many times as a young person, that I'm always trying to think what's on the other side of something, or how can this thing that we're being shown, that's being mediated to us in terms of images of what's happening in the world, how can that be undermined or overturned in some way? Not just for the sake of it, but for the sake of leaving the experience of a work and getting back into the world with your eyes sharpened somehow in a way which they weren't before.
Providing a new perspective, maybe.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least an understanding that there is a multiplicity of perspectives in the world.
Well, I'm personally so grateful for the art to do that, because I really believe that for many people the art and culture really provides this kind of possibility to have more perspectives and different perspectives, and a possibility to reflection, basically. We are actually running out of time a little bit, so I think there are also some questions from the audience. Do you think there is a difference on the view of displacement from an Afro-Swedish and Afro-American perspective? What you say is that that's an.
I mean, there's obviously certain alliances. I think there's a real kind of there's a hierarchy of experience, and I think the Black American experience is often takes precedence over other experiences of people of African descent. And so being Afro-Swedish is something which is very specific to that culture. And Swedish culture, despite being in the Western world, is fundamentally different from that of American culture in terms of, the idea of consensus, the idea of not standing out too much, which is somehow ingrained still into the identity of the place, Sweden. So there's certainly a difference, but then, of course, displacement is displacement. And, Edward Said talks about that the immigrant or the person in exile always feels themselves to be on a stage in some kind of platform where they have to show who they are. And then at the same time, in some kind of like dreary non-existence, in that new place, which is so much less rich or often than the place that they have come from. But one always does feel that you need to perform somehow, or put yourself on stage if you're a newcomer or if you're in exile somewhere. And that experience, I think, is universal.
So the next question maybe continues on that thinking. Do you think that an American audience will react to and interpret your work differently than a Swedish audience?
I mean, I think the answer is yes, but I think it also goes back to what I just said about there not being one definition of what an American and what an American audience is. And yeah, I hope with any work of art or any video or film that one can respond to it based on your life experience. And America has 350 million people who have life experiences which are somehow unique and overlapping with one another at the same time. But I think so. I mean, I think we all carry our cultural or baggage or inheritance or whatever you want to call it with us. And when we are face to face with certain types of work or arts practice, we can, that comes into play somehow in the way you see something.
Interpret that.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take one more question here. It's a big one. What is your driving force as an artist? What are your inspirations?
Well, I mean, I take inspiration a lot from literature and from film, cinematic film, even though I'm hesitant myself to kind of try and mimic the aesthetic of industrial cinema, Hollywood cinema, things like that. But in terms of a driving force, I mean, that must be an American question. I think if there's something that comes out of the practice that I have engaged with in my life, it's that if some of these stories which haven't risen to the level of history can rise in the works and be considered somehow, and if an audience member or a person who is spending some time with the work can kind of understand that there is a fluidity and there's a softness to the definitions that we give ourselves as people and as societies, I think that could be something that can be considered productive or useful or almost a driving force, although I would never drive in that sense.
But you said driving force is an American expression, but another American expression is probably to make a difference. So as a follow-up, is that actually also a driving force, that you believe that you can make a difference through your artistic work?
It's not up to me. I don't know.
That's
up to the people who interact with the work. I mean, I can only make work from my perspective, and when work when something becomes a work of art. It's when you fill it with meaning, and it can only be something of value to others if, I mean, I guess I can put it like this. I always put myself as the employee or as the servant of the work, and that's when it becomes something which is real. You know, when the work gets to a point as it's developing, as the idea is developing, or even in the production of it, that I start hearing what the work wants. So it's not about me deciding what this is going to mean or what it's going to say. The work itself starts to come alive and starts to become something that I can offer my services to. I can offer my skills in image making, let's say, if that's the case. And then once it is that entity, and it does get shown, it's if it works well, then it's something that other people with their, you know, cultural inheritance can find their own pathways to from whatever point of view they have in the world. And mine is just one, even though I'm the one who's made the work.
That was such a beautiful answer. So I think we should stop there, actually, because that was a perfect end of this very interesting conversation. And we have also consumed our 1 hour that we had. So I really want to say thank you to all of you who have listened and participated. And thank you to the Embassy of Sweden for inviting us, and to the technical crew, of course. And most of all, thank you to you, Santiago.